my hips rolling too far forward on the saddle. I felt like I got the saddle in a really, really great position, and then I just couldn't keep my hips back. Like even.
I'm John Cobb, and I'm here with Ian Bormett, and we're going to discuss, triathlon bikes and comfort. And Ian recently received one of our Type 5 saddles, and he's doing triathlons and is starting out. And Ian's a student at the University of Wisconsin, majoring in electrical engineering, and he's a senior. So he's pretty soon going to be out into the world and have time to train, do Ironman racing and all. So it'll be good adventure for him. Ian, how long have you been doing triathlons?
Well, I did a sprint distance about halfway through high school just for fun. I ran cross country and track and was a swimmer. Kind of had a family friend suggested. It sounded like a fun challenge to do in the summer to help keep me in shape, and just to see how it went. So I borrowed a bike. It was a road bike with clip-ons that was definitely way too big for me, kind of the classic beginner in triathlon story, but I really liked it. And I did a couple more throughout high school, and then got to college, and I wanted to find like a club sport to do to, keep me in shape and, meet some friends and such. And University of Wisconsin had an awesome triathlon club that I've been a part of ever since.
Great. Well, it's a fun thing to do. It's something you can do your whole life. I'm an old guy now, but I started doing triathlons when I was about your age. And so it's a sport that you can stay in and keep you healthy for a long time. So I see your bike in the background. And as I understand it, initially you were having on your original bike setup, you had some other kind of seat on there, and you were having comfort issues, and somehow you got in contact with us, and so we got you a seat and got you going on that. So how's your performance in general on your bike?
My performance this season has really, on the bike, has really stepped up to another level. And part of that is from, dedicating a lot of my winter to intervals and being on the trainer and, putting a lot of time in. And just, I haven't, didn't race during all of 2020. So there's a pretty big jump between 2019 and 2021. But I got the Type 5 in late spring when I was building up for Ironman 70.3 Des Moines. My power numbers were pretty good at that point going into that race. I think I got the saddle about a month out, but I was having a lot of comfort issues. I was only able to spend, short intervals, short periods of time actually in the aero bars because, I was having so much discomfort there. And, it's starting to get warmer here in Wisconsin, and it's going on my long outdoor rides. And I just found myself needing to be up on the base bar way too much. I mean, during the race, you'd want to stay as aero as possible. And, I got the chance to try out the Type 5 through our team and talking with Andrew. And within a couple of rides, it was a feeling of night and day.
Well, great. So as you change seats or change anything on your bike, it doesn't matter if you get new wheels or something, you're always having to change your position. And as your fitness level changes, you're also having to change your position to take advantage of that. But anyway, are you using a team kit for your triathlons?
Yep. Yeah, I'm racing in our team triathlon kit.
And I tell people all the time that I think chamois thickness and chamois types are important. For a race day, you're swimming and you got to go run, and you don't really want much chamois in the way, that especially anything in hold water. Mm-hmm. But do you notice a big difference between what you train in and a race day kit, or what are you experiencing on that for clothing?
Yeah, I would say there's definitely a difference. With a lot of the racing that I've done this year, especially since 70.3 Des Moines was shortened to a 27-mile bike, there's so much adrenaline and other stuff going on during the race that I don't focus a ton on, how that's feeling. I'm just trying to hit, power, stay on track on the course and everything. But I do 95% of my training in cycling bibs, and our team tri kits have essentially a piece of felt for a chamois. It's basically no chamois.
Right.
This year we got a new kit sponsor, so that's changing for the better. It's a little bit more of a thin chamois, but there's definitely I did a Olympic race a couple of weeks ago in Maple Grove, Minnesota, and at the end of that ride, I was definitely having to shift around every few minutes and kind of change my position by a few millimeters here and there to relieve some pressure, because I was realizing that, oh, there's zero padding that I'm sitting on suddenly.
Right. Well, a couple things that, a lot of times people have to address when they're new to the sport. And that's what we run into a lot of times in our conversations is these are new athletes and somebody gave them a bike, they bought a bike because their buddies were training and they want to do it. But one is just basically, how do you position your body parts in these clothes to take advantage of it? And, I was explaining to someone the other day, I said, well, the biggest thing I suggest is you just kind of reach down and grab a handful of everything and pull it up real high, and then have your shorts up, because that'll help hold your stuff up out of the way. Mm-hmm. And then when you're on the bike seat, as you roll forward, it keeps things from getting pinched and pressured so bad. And so I think that's something that people overlook a lot of times is their body part positions in their tri gear. But it's important. And like we offer some shorts that I designed, and they're designed specifically for the men to hold your package in place really a certain way. It really helps you on the run, and it just makes you a lot more comfortable.
That's super valuable. Yeah. 2 years ago, at an older iteration of this race up in Minnesota, I had some extremely unfortunate blistering because I didn't pay attention to making sure everything was in place, before the race started.
Right. And those blisters last a long time after that race. So it's kind of a bad deal.
Yeah, it's not fun.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's important. I always recommend using Body Glide or some kind of chamois cream all the time, especially when it's hot. Down here, it's super hot all the time. So I think that really helps, because a chamois alone just won't always solve your problems. And then by the time you swim and get out of that, and then, do the bike, and then you got to go run, any of that chamois or silicone type cream will really help on all those situations, to help build comfort. So I think that matters. But the other thing is just the basic place to sit on the saddle, because where I would sit on my Type 5 could be different than yours. And it just has to do with our sit bone width and things like that. And, I encourage people to set their bikes up to really sit forward, where you're just out over the nose of the seat. And I tell people, if you look down and you can see the nose of the seat, you're not forward enough. And they go, well, that's like really forward. I said, yeah, it's a lot of times you'll have to extend your stem or your aero bars to get out to that position. But generally, you want to be able to be just in a running position on the seat. You ought to be able to close your eyes while you're on a trainer or riding and just really feel like you're running. And exactly. So that means your hips have to be really pretty far forward. But that really helps your muscle memory, and it helps your muscles really get in and start the run a lot better. The clock doesn't care where the time comes from in the race. So if you can run the first mile a minute faster because your muscles are, your hip flexors and all are not revolting after getting off the bike, it just makes everything go a lot better. So those are, points to consider, as you're working on comfort.
Yeah, for sure. And I've had a lot of issues with my hips rolling too far forward on the saddle. I felt like I got the saddle in a really, really great position, and then I just couldn't keep my hips back. Like even sitting far forward on the saddle, I just roll forward, and I'll get a lot of, really uncomfortable pressure up in that area between the legs. And it ended up being issues with the front of my setup even as well, because I was, shifting too much of my body weight forward. And I've also got some scoliosis issues in my lower back, but nailing the front setup of the bike, I found, was really the key to getting the comfort better on the saddle as well.
Well, that's exactly right. And like in your bike, you look to have about a 10 or 12 centimeter drop, which aerodynamically is really good. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important. a lot of times people won't build that kind of a drop into their bike because they say, well, I just can't go that low. My back won't do it. Well, your back will do it if you'll just rotate your pelvis. But to rotate your pelvis, you have to get everything in the seat area working right or it crushes stuff. Yep. And so that's an important lesson. That's key to upper arm length and things like that.
Yeah, and incredibly, I actually got more comfortable going lower. I got rid of 2 5mm spacers below my elbow pads, working with one of your fitters through some video calls, and with a few other small adjustments, that was more comfortable than being higher up on the bike.
Yeah. When I fit people on their road bikes, I do this drop position. And when people see it, they just go, how can you even ride that? And I mean, I have women who run, 12 and 15 centimeters of drop. I mean, their hands are rubbing the top of the tires on their bars. And it was, how could you even send someone out like that? I said, it's really comfortable once you get there. And it's more powerful, I think, once you get there. So on aero bikes, I did a wind tunnel test a few years ago. Everybody said, well, can you go too low? I go, I don't believe that, but, I'll test it. So I had a boy and his wife who were time trialists in California. And I took him to the wind tunnel and spent a bunch of money studying this. And so I set them out and had them do power meter tests. This was about a 6-month project. And so they both went out and rode their bikes and adjusted the bikes to the lowest they could go with the cranks they were using and everything at the power they knew they could make and what their time was. And so like for a 40K, he did a 55-minute 40K, which is pretty fast. Mm-hmm. And so I took him to the wind tunnel and I said, now don't worry about whether you can breathe or not. Let's just work on aerodynamics. And so I dropped this fellow and he already had a drop about like yours. And I dropped him another 10 centimeters. So his nose was scraping the front wheel, but his aerodynamics just went plummeting down, without, just doing the math, his time was 2 minutes and something faster for a 40K, which is a huge deal.
Yeah.
But could he really go ride that way was the question. So I agreed that he couldn't, but I also came and changed his cranks. He was riding, this young man was 6'2". He was riding 172.5 cranks. I put him on 155 cranks and argued my way into it and sent him out for a ride. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, he goes out on the road and backs up that time with a solid 53 something 40K. So it does take buying into the whole deal to go super low on the front end. You've got to have the seat, you got to have the right chamois, you got to have the right aero bars, you got to have short cranks, you got to have all this stuff. But there's a lot of free speed there, so to speak, if you get your aerodynamics right. And we did the same thing for his wife. His wife was also, she was 5'11", so she was pretty tall, riding 172.5 cranks. I put her on some 145 cranks, got her cadence up, did a bunch of other stuff, and we dropped about a similar 2 minutes off her time. And it was just incredible. And, they just couldn't believe it. But that's why people, a lot of times they're doing triathlons, they say, well, what does aerodynamics really matter? I said, well, if you can't get off and run, it doesn't matter at all because the run is the race. But if it can help you get to the run and feel good, then aerodynamics is worth doing. Little things add up. Like now, be sure and interrupt me because I'll start jumping around on this discussion. But it's things like helmets. You got to have a helmet that cools you very well, but there's some big aerodynamic differences in helmets. And somebody said, well, what helmet should I get? I said, well, any aero helmet is going to be better than any road helmet. The aero helmets have made big improvements in the last few years because the manufacturers kind of started investing in them, and used to all the helmets had these long tails on them and all that, and they were cool looking, but they were heavy and they didn't actually, I can't say they didn't work, but they didn't universally work as well for everybody. And then manufacturers started going to the wind tunnel and doing some studies, and they've learned that they can change the lower shapes of the helmets. And now aero helmets just are universally, like on a half Ironman, a helmet's worth a minute and a half. Well, that's
Yeah.
a long way. So it's worth studying on that. But if your position's not comfortable, that Aero helmet's not going to fix it.
Nope.
It all adds up.
How much, for the Aero helmet choice, how much does your body's integration with the helmet shape kind of affect how effective it is? I've read before that it's not so much the model of the Aero helmet that matters. It's almost more about how that helmet, fits in with the curvature of your back in your bike fit.
Well, it matters some. Clothing's a big deal. It all, it's intertwined. But on helmets, it used to be when everybody used those long tail helmets that your shoulder shape and meaning, did you have square shoulders or kind of more rounded shoulders? And people were turtling their heads and doing all this stuff. So that would matter on those. But now with this new helmets, like the new Rudy Project Aero 1, it's got a kind of a nice round coned rear shape. So your shoulder shape doesn't matter very much. But gotcha. What does matter on helmets like Rudy's, I designed the Aero Wing and the Wing 57 for him. And what I told him was, I can design the fastest Aero helmet in the world for any one person. So, but you sell to a lot of people. I said, let's do something even better. So, because, I'm a racer, I'm not a pro, I'm not even any good, but I go out and have fun in it. And I said, but what I notice is at the end of the race, my neck's killing me. What can we do to solve that? So I built a thing that measured torque on your neck. And really? So we go to the wind tunnel, and I worked on helmet shapes that negated helmet torque, because a long tail helmet in a crosswind can generate 5 or 6 pounds of force against your neck. Well, wow. Your neck doesn't have any muscles in it that are really geared up for that kind of motion for an hour or 2 hours on the bike. Yep. So the Rudy helmets, we got down to where they had zero torque, and people would ride them and they'd go, man, I don't know what it is. It just feels so good when I ride it. So, well, it wasn't because it fit your ears better or anything. It's because it just wasn't twisting your head all the time in the crosswinds. And so those, have turned out to be real popular helmets. So you want to combine that with an aggressive aero position. And then that's, again, seat choice goes back to the aggressive aero position. Like in your case, you're using a Type 5, but you go to a triathlon and there's so many women that would not choose a Type 5, given the choice. They'll use like our Max or Type P or Delta M or, one of those seats, more of a traditional looking seat because they need a little more support everywhere. But that's why it's hard to just nail down this seat as the perfect seat for everybody. Like on your bike, just looking at it, if my bike was sitting there, the nose of my seat on my aero bike is actually a little bit lower than what yours would be. Okay.
You mean you tilt it forward a little bit, the saddle?
Yeah, right. Okay. I just dropped the nose just a little bit, and I'm running 155 cranks. And that makes a difference, and because crank length's a big deal, and old age flexibility is a big deal for me. But you want to be able to get over the top of the cranks, and pull through, and have your hip flexors and all help, build more power. So I ended up kind of having my seat tilted down just a little bit, even though in all my literature, I preach about run level to nose high, when in actuality on my bike, the nose is probably a full centimeter lower than the back.
Wow. All right. Do you have issues with sliding forward on the saddle?
The problem sliding forward is the tilt of your aero bars affects that.
Okay.
So if you're sliding forward, you can drop your hands lower, rotate your bars down so that your hands are a little bit lower.
Gotcha. Okay.
And aerodynamically, you say, well, if my hands are too low, isn't it going to scoop the air up? I said, yeah, it might. It's a little bit in the wind tunnel. That's a wind tunnel thing. But unless you're in the new, praying mantis position where your, elbows are together and your hands are in your face, anywhere other than up here, anywhere in this range, there's just not going to be an aerodynamic difference that amounts to anything versus not being able to sit on the seat very long. So I don't want to ever discourage anybody from trying to go just a little bit below level on the nose of the seats. But you don't want to go like super drop, because then, all your weight's on your shoulders, and you come out of the swim and all of a sudden you got to go ride the bike, you can't hold yourself up. Well, it just sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I've just really noticed that if I can forget about trying to hold my body taut in an aero position and really just focus on, what my legs are doing down there from a power standpoint, or handling the bike if it's a technical course, it makes such a big difference. It's really huge. Yeah.
It's a big deal. And then in racing, it's just like everything else. You've got to watch your competition, and there's times in the course that you got to do surges. You got to be sure you're not caught drafting, or, got caught in a drafting situation to where even though may not be drafting, you're caught in the box. So you got to pay attention to all that. And it's really important to, as a young guy, you'll be a lot faster than me. You got to pay attention to the surroundings and use things to block the wind. So, you can say, well, here's a tree line coming up ahead. I can get over here to help shield myself from some of the wind and different things like that. And you just have to be conscious of that, because every mile is part of it. And so the things you can do aerodynamically to help yourself is good. And that's why I think that, I keep encouraging our customers to explore the whole package. It's cranks. And now that everybody can have power numbers pretty easily, I think it's so much more easily to see the value to things like shorter cranks. What power system do you use, or do you have one? Or?
Yeah, I'm running a Stages left crank right now, which is unfortunate because I've really been looking at your short cranks and I want to upgrade to those, but I'm gonna have to get something that's
college kid. It won't be a problem.
But yeah, I do want to upgrade to shorter cranks at that point. That just means having to change the power meter setup, and so it's on the list for sure.
Well, and that's what we talk to people all day on the phone about that. And I tell them, I said, well, because things are changing, it depends on where you are, what stage you're in your racing career. If you've got all your equipment set and you don't see anything on the horizon other than you just want a new bike or whatever, then you know what length crank you're going to get. Well, so then operate off of a crank-based system. So, but until you're to that point, keep using a pedal system, because they're all kind of within, a couple of % of each other. But with a pedal system, if you've got a road bike or a tri bike or a new bike or whatever, you can move them around. So I'm kind of a fan of those.
Yeah, in hindsight, I bought a left crank for my road bike and my tri bike. And for roughly the same amount of money, I could have gotten a pedal system. And I've been chastising myself ever since that I went for the 2 crank arms instead.
Well, you've got that perfect hindsight now, so you can spread that wisdom on to the young guys,
Exactly, yep.
But, cranks are a big deal, and power meters are certainly a big deal. But it all has to do with saving energy to get ready for the run. And that's just part of the racing. So I think that's, good stuff to consider.
Yeah, for sure. I did have a question for you kind of pertaining to racing and race situations. I've been kind of testing out, a lot of the courses that we do here in the Midwest tend to be a lot of rolling hills or little punchy kickers. At what kind of, I guess, not necessarily incline, but at what speed do you generally recommend getting out of your aero position and, getting onto the base bar to climb in an upright position?
Well, if you're doing a race to where you're going up a hill that you're in your big chain ring, and I don't care what gear you're in the back, you're still in your big chain ring in the front, you shouldn't ever be out of your aero bars.
Okay.
But if you're in your small chain ring in the front and you look down and you've got like 2 gears left in the back, then you might consider it, because you're going up a pretty steep hill. Yeah. You might consider that. But what happens in triathlon is, and everybody's guilty of this, you go out and train and race, and you train at 90 or 95 RPM, you run this cadence all the time, you're great. You get out there on race day and you say, everybody says, what kind of cadence are you gonna race that day? Oh man, 90. I'm gonna save a little for the run. So I'm gonna cycle at 90, because I run at 92 or 3 cadence. Well, you come back after the race and you check your average cadence, and it turned out it was 77. And that's what happens as you get into a race, you see people, and the only way you can catch them is run a harder gear. and all of a sudden your cadence starts dropping and you're in the low 80s, all of a sudden you're in the high 70s, but you're catching people. And
Yep.
that's all you care about on race day. I'm catching people, but you're not really mapping just how many calories you're burning. It's not just watts, it's just calories burning, pushing those harder gears because it's race day. It's what you do.
I've definitely caught myself mashing gears up little hills. Yeah.
Oh yeah, all the time. And so the answer is stay on your aero bars.
All right.
and,
All
and
right.
usually, really leverage with them. You paid for the whole bar, so don't be afraid to choke up 3 or 4 inches and get the elbow pads, way up here to where you're really leveraging. And
All right.
the worst information that road racers ever give triathletes is don't move your upper body, keep your upper body still. Well, that's just bogus. That doesn't work at all. If you watch the fast guys in the Tour de France, the road guys, they're all over that bike. I mean, they're everywhere. It's because you've got to use all these back muscles to build power.
Yeah.
So in your aero bars, you can choke up and leverage against your elbow pads and really build power with your back. That's the one thing I don't like about the praying mantis position is it's super hard to build that. And then you're just operating off core strength. And
Sure.
none of us have enough core strength. And so I think you're giving up for sure a little aerodynamics, but who cares? I think you're building more power. I think you're building 15 or 20 watts more power leveraging on your aero bars. And
All
so
right.
I think that's worth doing.
I'll definitely keep that in mind for all the rollers. There are, a few hills in Ironman, Wisconsin. We call them the 3 bitches. You have to do them all twice on the loop.
Mhm.
And one of them averages about 9%, I believe, and the others are in that range. And I think for those, I'm going to have to be out on the base bar, cranking on it side to side. But for everything else, I'll definitely do my best to just stay down in the aero bars.
Well, I mean, that's part of the game. And, it's all about racing against the clock. So you have to say, well, what do I got to do to not kill myself to get up this hill?
Yep.
Save something for the run, because the worst case you're going to do is give up 15 or 20 seconds on the hill, and you're going to give up 5 minutes on the run.
Yep.
Well, that's a bad trade. So anyway, that's great. Well, Ian, it was great talking to you today. I hope we answered some of your questions, and we can certainly do more of these conferences and, get some more questions together, and we'll be glad to do that. But I appreciate you calling in today, and
Thank you.
I hope some other people can watch this and learn some stuff.
Yeah, I hope so too. It's always awesome to hear from, someone like that's a pioneer in this industry, and to answer all questions like this, because oftentimes we just try to read articles on the internet and, we don't get all these views. We don't have years of experience behind us to help us inform our decisions. And, it's such a big factor in performance. Like you said, you can make a swing of 2 to 4 minutes or more on your bike by literally just changing your position. And at the Olympic distance that our college team, races at, that's huge.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Because in all things, business or pleasure, doing triathlon, time is money, and that's how it goes.
Exactly.
That's how it
Yep.
goes. Well, thank you again, and I look forward to helping you any way I can.
Yeah, appreciate it.